The Cleveland Cavaliers select Evan Mobley.
Has been a historical franchise in this league for years.
We have a trade to announce. The Boston Celtics select Jason Tatum.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Happy Friday. Got a weekend coming up, and we've got a lot of NBA trade news to dig into today. 'Tis the season. Trade deadline comes up on February 10th. Don't forget. Let's kick things off with the Sacramento Kings. Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Looks like De'Aaron Fox potentially on the move by the deadline. What are you thinking about that? Feels like there's more and more buzz. That drumbeat is growing louder.
Yeah, that one came from Chris Haynes over at Yahoo Sports. Chris reporting that even in a conversation and some quotes from De'Aaron Fox of, hey, we're not winning. So it sounds like he kind of gets why, maybe he could be on the market. No, by no means was anything like he was requesting a trade and he did not express any unhappiness other than the not winning part. But I mean, that's every player everywhere where you're not winning. But yeah, I mean, he is just in year one of a 5-year max contract extension. So that's a little tough to move off a guy that early. But if you're the Kings and you feel like that's the guy, he's the one who can go get us the big pieces in return and do all this and move him on, then maybe that's the direction you go. There was some subsequent reporting, I believe, by Mark Stein that the Kings and Sixers had engaged on a Fox for Simmons swap, but didn't get very far down that path. It sounds like much like we know that the Sixers are continuing to drive a higher asking price than De'Aaron Fox for Ben Simmons. So, yeah, I mean, it's just something worth watching. There's a lot of guys. Let's just get into it now. Buddy Hield and Harrison Barnes, both expected to be moved. Hield was, thought he was going to be a Laker. He's even openly said that he thought that was a done deal. And then Barnes is, this is year, like I said, umpteen of him being in trade rumors. And then Marvin Bagley, another guy, maybe still engaged with the Detroit Pistons, still interested on Bagley. And that one takes on a little bit more interest after the Bol trade was voided due to a failed physical. Maybe the Pistons kind of pivot back to Bagley and say, hey, yeah, we'll take him for the rest of the year and see what it looks like and, deal with his free agency this summer. So my guess is when you have this much smoke, there's usually some form of a fire that's around it. I don't know if it's going to be everybody that goes, but we'll see. And then Tyrese Halliburton too, just to be clear, people are asking about him. The Kings are not they're not hanging up the phone right away, but it sounds like he's the guy they'd rather not move if they, could avoid it.
Right. Which makes sense. Now, I mean, it's sounding like this Sacramento Kings team maybe, and you can add the Pacers to the list as well. These might be the top two teams in terms of teams that we would expect that when the dust settles from the trade deadline on February 11th, the team's going to look vastly different than the way it looks right now. De'Aaron Fox, you mentioned that new contract. Averaging 21 points per game this season, 5 assists, which is his low since his rookie season. And he's also shooting a career low, 24% from three. How much trade value does he realistically have given the way that he's played this year?
Yeah, you have to, the question you're having to ask yourself there, if you're looking at De'Aaron Fox was last year the outlier year where he jumped up to 25 points, 7 assists, shooting percentages were all fairly good, 47.7% overall, only 32% from three, but he did get the volume up to 5.5 per game. That's the question you're asking is that the real De'Aaron Fox, or is this the guy that's a little more real where he can't really hit a jump shot right now and he can score, but the playmaking is down a little bit? That's going to be what you're kind of wondering. I also do wonder, his minutes are down just slightly this year. We know they, of course, have Halliburton. They also have Davion Mitchell, who they drafted in the first round. So that becomes a thing that you want to monitor. But my guess is some team somewhere will look and say, nah, he's more of the real guy. And they're, fair or unfair, there's a belief around the league of get guys out of Sacramento and you'll find out exactly who they are and what they can be, just because it's been such a mess there for so many years and so many guys have gone on to be better elsewhere. So that I tend to think those things are a little unfair because it's different coaching staffs, different front offices, but I mean, we're moving on a decade and a half of this same kind of story. So there's some truth in there to that for sure.
Sure, it's like getting players out of the Adam Gase era Jets, right? You get them away from there, and suddenly they're great. Okay, Sam Darnold, maybe not, but just about everybody else, right? You get them away from that location, and maybe you do see a little bit of an improvement there. So I do think there's going to be a market for him, but like you said, the question is the contract, and you have to be convinced that he's not the guy that we're seeing right now, that he's actually at a different level. I do think it's interesting, Harrison Barnes. I would feel like there's so many places he could fit, right? He's one of those guys where, I mean, just point to about any team in the NBA and you can go, oh, I could see how he could fit there. He's not a difficult fit in so many different places. I have to imagine he's going to have a fairly robust market.
Yeah, and he's at 20 million this year, and then that number drops down into around 18 million for next season. So, those are that's not a a number that's so big that it gets really hard to move. But when the contract gets hard to move is when you're north of 25 million and you're not a true max player, because you're starting to close in on max territory with that number. But yeah, I mean, I said it yesterday. Harrison Barnes talking with someone in the front office that said, if you need him to be your third guy, he'll be your third guy. You need him to be your sixth or seventh guy, he'll be your sixth or seventh guy. And that's everybody believes that in this guy around the league, because he's very plug and play. He's productive no matter where he is, no matter what his role is. He can scale up or down appropriately. So yeah, if they want to finally pull that trigger and say, we got to go, we got to do something with Harrison Barnes, then this is the time, right? Because there's a lot of teams, again, the league is pretty wide open. So there's a lot of teams, I think, that are looking at this and saying, hey, all right, let's go. Let's make the move. Let's push all in and try to win a championship.
Now, if Sacramento, who there's been plenty of buzz about them and Ben Simmons, if it comes down to the 76ers say, if you want this deal, you have to take Tobias Harris, is that something that you think the Kings should be willing to do?
I don't think I would if I was the Kings, because if I'm moving off all these guys, I'm looking to reset. Like I'm looking for a full reset with, you could reset around Ben Simmons. He's still young enough to do that with, but I would really be pushing to get a third team to send Tobias Harris off to, because then the value of Ben Simmons just gets eroded away a little bit, as far as all right, now I've got Harris and I can't, those two guys alone, plus with whatever leftover salary you have, you're probably right at the cap. That starts to become kind of difficult. So I would try to avoid that, but I guess it kind of depends. I mean, if you're talking shipping out Fox and Barnes, is that having Simmons and Harris, is that necessarily all that worse? I guess it really kind of depends on where you're looking overall.
Yeah, and how they fit, what the role they're, who's going to be playing around those guys, all that would certainly matter. The Pistons as a destination for Bagley, that makes tons of sense, especially if they're going to take a flyer on Bol Bol. Why not? He's a second draft kind of guy. Take a chance on Bagley, and again, same idea, get him out of Sacramento. Maybe that's when they really get to thrive. So
and then you'd have his restricted rights this summer. If he really pops, you've kind of got control of that process, and you can figure those things out with him this offseason.
Let's jump to the Raptors. Maybe call it a comeback. I don't know. They want. Apparently, they're interested in Jakob Poeltl, who's been very, very good. Beat up on my Lakers when the Spurs and Lakers played. Jakob Poeltl has been really good for the Spurs this year, and apparently Toronto is interested in bringing him back. Do you think the Spurs are going to be sellers there, and do you like that fit in Toronto?
I love the fit for the Toronto side of that. The center position is where that's kind of the only spot where they don't have a long-term answer, because they've got oodles of forwards with Siakam, Anunoby, Barnes. You've got the backcourt seems fairly well set with Van Vliet and Trent. They've got the tradable contract in Goran Dragic without giving up a productive player. They're playing really well too. They're up to 8th in the East. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games. They're really kind of started to push up the standings there. So if they really feel hey, Poeltl's the guy, we want to supplement what we have, what we're going to push in and go. And you're right, like on Poeltl, I don't think people fully realize he's averaging a career high 12.4 points per game. He's at 1.4 blocks per game, 8.8 rebounds, 4.1 offensive rebounds per game too. I mean,
that's impactful.
Yeah, that's huge. One of the best offensive rebounders in the entire league there. And he does it all on San Antonio in less than 30 minutes a night, too. So, that's you start to scale those numbers a little bit. Now, you can't scale it too much because he is kind of foul prone, because he challenges a lot of shots. He goes after a lot of things. But I mean, and the reality is the Toronto crew already knows this guy because they had him previously. They drafted him in the first round back in 2016. So, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense there. My problem is, what do you send into San Antonio?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go.
Why does San
What do you
Antonio
give?
want him? Yeah, and why does San Antonio want to move him? Right, he's 26. He'll be 27 right around the start of next season. So he's still young enough because he's a center. You always got to kind of think of centers a little bit differently than some of the other positions. But he's still young enough to fit in as they grow around Murray and White and Keldon Johnson. And that's the problem. San Antonio, the deep spot for Toronto is their wings. And San Antonio doesn't need any of them because they're swimming in good wing options or young wing options at the very least. So I don't know that there's necessarily a trade match there, but it is interesting. And it does say Toronto's probably looking for a center in a long-term solve.
And contractually looking on Spot Track here, he's $8.7 million this season, $9.4 million next season, and then he's an unrestricted free agent. Like that's not a contract where you're thinking, gosh, I got to get out from under this deal or anything like that. That's a valuable, very realistic, reasonable price tag for him. So yeah, if I'm the Spurs, I want something good if I'm moving him. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, the weird thing with the Spurs is the worst contract that they still have is Zach Collins, the most confusing contract of the offseason.
Yes.
And he still hasn't debuted, despite the fact that they said maybe right after Christmas. We still haven't seen him. And that's not even bad because they can get out of it so easily after this season. So they don't have any bad money. So they're not in a position where they need to start, moving pieces to reset or anything like that. So, and it's also, we got to always put the caveat in there and remind everybody, the Spurs don't really do in-season trades. It's not a thing that they do. So that's another thing to keep an eye on as well.
I would still expect Thad Young to wind up somewhere, right?
Yeah, I would imagine they've got to be able to trade him. I mean, if not, they're definitely going to buy him out because there's no reason to keep him there, and not play him the rest of the year. He's also been very open that he's not happy with that situation of not playing. So yeah, there's got to be something there. But yeah, I'm with you. That's got to be where, like, hey, even if your rule is no in-season trade, break that rule and move that guy off and get whatever small return you can for him.
It makes too much sense. It makes too much sense to not move him somewhere. There's teams that will want him, so I would expect to see that happen. Sticking with Toronto, or should I say, sticking with a former Raptor, I should have said, Norman Powell. This is interesting. Yeah. He's been pretty good this season for the Blazers. He's got 19 points per game. He's shooting a perfectly respectable 46 if we round up percent from the field, 40% from three. Apparently, though, he might be a guy that's going to get some interest on the trade market, and he is a tradable piece apparently for the Blazers. And we even have news that the Pelicans could be a team that's interested in landing him. What do you make of all of that? I don't know if he's a guy that I'm looking to necessarily part with if I'm Portland, but then again, if you need to make changes, he's probably a guy that at least has some value out there that you could put on the market.
Yeah, he was re-signed to a 5-year, $90 million contract this offseason. So 15.5 this year, 16.7, and going up from there with the standard raises. It goes up by about 1.2 million or so every year. Until 25, 26, no options in this deal for Powell either. He finishes at 20.5 million that year for unrestricted free agent 26, 27. So my thing is, if you're looking at it, he'll be 29 at the end of this season. So that's starting to factor in just a little bit. But you rattled off some of the stats. He's good. He's pretty efficient, shoots well from the field. He's, as his volume has increased, he's scaled that up. A lot of times we see that volume goes up and the guy's play drops off.
Sure.
He's done a little bit more as a playmaker this year. I think that's been the result of CJ and Dame being out. He's had the ball to kind of run the offense through him a little bit more. I guess if I'm Portland, what I'm looking at is if I make this kind of trade, this is the signal of we're really starting to reset this thing. And there was reporting today, Damian Lillard, I believe it was Brian Windhorst had some of it, that he is not, this surgery doesn't have anything, him wanting a trade or anything like that. He still wants to be there. So I continue to say until we hear otherwise, assume whatever Portland does is to reset around Dame, not without Dame. But yeah, if you're going to trade Powell, trade Nurkic, trade Covington, explore the market for CJ, see where that's at, and start moving on. And what really may be factoring in here is, if you're the Trailblazers and you're thinking, all right, we're going to still have Dame and CJ, or we're at least going to have one of them, do we want to re-sign Anfernee Simons, who has really been playing great? And if you're going to re-sign him, that starts to be, I mean, we already said, right, that's a lot of money locked up in 3 yards anyway, and Paul, McCollum, and Lillard. If you're going to re-sign Simons, you can't have that much cash locked up in 4 guards. It's just possible. And Simons is, I think, let me make sure I have the straight. He doesn't even turn 23 until after this season, till the off season. So, I mean, he's young, he's good, he's going to get paid by somebody. Yeah. So if you're a Portland, you've that to me starts to be, all right, are we resetting? And that's why we're going to move Powell, because we think we can get just as good, similar production out of Simons. Yeah, something that they absolutely have to factor in. And if you're looking at, what happened last night to the Blazers, they lost by 32 to the Nuggets. So, I mean, they're in a tough spot right now. Yeah, they do. But here's the thing, Keith, you got to be careful if you're the Blazers. If you're going to make a move, I think it makes a lot of sense to make a move to reset and ensure that you keep your draft pick. Because obviously, I mean, they lost by 32. That would suggest that they're about to make a playoff run. But come down to the final week of the season, you might accidentally win a couple of games. The next thing you know, you don't have a pick. That could really compound the issue. So I would look at I'm leaning much more towards the seller side of things right now if I'm the Blazers. Well, we had said maybe, I want to say it was probably around a month or so ago now. It was like mid-December. I think we had the whole conversation. Are the 10 teams in the West set? And then Portland took this big tumble down in the standing. Sacramento, as much as they do, got their crap together and started playing a little bit better. San Antonio's hung around. New Orleans has really started to play pretty good. I want to say there's something like 7-1, 7-2 with the Valanciunas, Ingram, Jones, Graham, and Hart lineup starting together, which that's, I mean, that's something, right? That at least says you stumbled into something. And now those teams they're right there with Portland. Portland is still in 10th in that last playing spot, but only a half game up on the Kings and Pelicans, a game up on the Spurs. Surprisingly, they're only 2 games up on the Thunder. So you could really drop this thing out pretty far and fall pretty low. You're not going to catch the catch Magic. Always sounds weird when you're trying to go that way. You're not going to fall as far as the Magic or Pistons, and probably not even the Rockets. But I mean, you could definitely fall into getting yourself a top 10 pick with fairly little fairly little trouble, I would say. Yeah, absolutely. And mentioning the Pelicans, they did get a win last night against the Clippers. Blew out the Clippers team that's been really tough. Actually, had just beat the Denver Nuggets will be coming back from a 25-point deficit. It's the Wild West. I don't know. All of those teams in both conferences that are from like 7 to like 11, 12, like it's like just, who played and they won. Okay. Like none of those moves really, like, they don't ever surprise me anymore. All right. Well, we hit a number of different teams here, breaking down a number of different rumors. We do still have a few more things to get to later today. We've got a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about the Lakers and their offer that was reported for Cam Reddish. We'll talk about the Dallas Mavericks being a landing spot for a few players, including Turner and Collins, looking for some bigs there. We'll talk about that. We'll get into Michael Porter Jr. maybe coming back. John Wall potentially on the buyout market. Might that actually happen? We'll get into all of that and more in our next video, so make sure you guys are on the lookout for that one. We figured we'd hit you with a double dose here on Friday to send you off into the weekend. Till then, guys, make sure you are subscribing right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell as well so you get notified every time we put out a new video. Till then, we'll see ya and stay safe.